For a little context, this story happened sometime between 2013 and 14 in the Philippines. My mum would wake up my little sister at 5 in the morning and make her breakfast downstairs of our house. Then she would take a shower upstairs in our parents' bathroom, whilst my sister eats her breakfast alone downstairs in the lounge while she watches TV. Then my mum would call out my sister's name from the hallway upstairs after she finishes showering to make her go upstairs, and then she would help her get ready for school. My sister gets picked up by our driver to school very early to avoid traffic, because the traffic is so bad in the Philippines. Anyway, my mom and my little sister have had this routine for years, and nothing unusual ever happened. However, one day, when they were doing their usual morning routine, my mom, who was showering, heard a scream coming from the first level of our house, and she knew that it was my little sister. She was in the shower, so she couldn't get out immediately. My mom grabbed a towel to cover herself and then rushed outside the hallway to call my little sister and ask her to come upstairs, but my sister answered, "No, I can't. I'm scared." My mom didn't pay too much attention to what my little sister said, as she thought she was just imagining things. My mum asked her a couple of more times to come upstairs, but my little sister would answer the same thing over and over. Eventually, my mum was able to convince my sister to go upstairs. However, instead of taking the quickest way to the stairs, my little sister went around the center table of our lounge and then around the kitchen table, seemingly avoiding something along the way to the stairs. Then my mum was helping her get ready for school. She asked my sister what happened downstairs, but my sister didn't reply, and she just kept crying. Then, fast forward to the same day, my little sister comes home from school, and my mum asked her what happened earlier that day, and my sister said, "While I was sitting on the couch, I leaned forward to plug in the TV, and then when I sat back up, there was a lady wearing a brown dress with a very long nose, sitting on the other end of the couch. She looked like a witch." And that's when my sister went around the center table in our lounge and the kitchen table, because she would have walked past the witch if she didn't. This happened years ago, and it still scares me to this day. The incident happened to me and a friend a month ago. It was not my first paranormal experience, but definitely one that made me think a lot about it again. We were outside at around 6 p.m. having a walk in my hometown when it was already dark, when I ran out of tobacco. We went to a nearby corner store. I got my stuff, and afterwards we were on our way to my home. On the way, there is, I believe, a former Jewish gravesite, now a park on the left side. I wanted to smoke one before we went, but since the park is often visited by strangers, we surpassed it and sat down nearby on a small wall, rolling up. When I wanted to start smoking, I noticed a light flickering inside one of the apartments on the right side of the street. You could see through the window into what looked like the dinner room with a light bulb, which seemed really weak, therefore causing the flickering light. When I kept watching though, I noticed shadowy silhouettes moving in a fast and weird way. There was nothing in front of the bulb to produce such shadows. When I wanted to tell my friend, he told me he had just seen it and was curious about what it was. The first thing I did was getting my phone and trying to film the incident, but whenever I moved the camera to the specific window with the creepy shadows, my phone screen just turned dark. When I moved the camera object away from the window, the screen returned to normal. I tried this like 5 or 6 times, always failing to take a picture or a video because my phone screen wouldn't let me. I could have filmed anything else fine, except for that window. When I put my phone away, the light bulb suddenly stops flickering and shines like it's been freshly exchanged. It didn't flicker a single time afterwards, and we sat there for like 20 minutes, before it seemed nearly dead. I kind of creeped out and continued our walk, but it still gives me chills when I think about it. I'm having trouble sleeping a lot. A lot of the time, I've been woken up by unexplained things and it scares me and my family. My family and I have been woken up in the middle of the night to figures watching us. I remember one dream so clearly. I was laying in my bed and I woke up to a black figure standing by the window. The dream felt long and I watched the figure get closer to me until it was right by my face. I could feel the dark figure breathe on me. I woke up in a panic and tried to fall back asleep. I tried to forget about the dream until a couple of days later, I could hear an exhale in my room. Later that night I was asleep. It was about 3:45 a.m. when I woke up to someone tapping my back repeatedly. Then I felt my blanket being tugged. I shrugged it off until I felt something tapping my head. I was panicking, but nothing was there. I've had problems of being woken up in the middle of the night to shadows in my room in middle school. I shared a room with my sister. We both woke up in the middle of the night. However, I saw a tan-coloured figure crouched down beside my bed looking at me. I was scared and hid under my blankets, and when I woke up, it was gone. Hoping my sister was awake, I said out loud to her, "Did you see that?" And she started crying and said yes. Whatever spirit was with me, it scares me, but I don't think it's intending to harm me or my sister. The problems happening in my house don't make sense, because we don't have an old home. It was built about 12 years ago. I can't explain what's happening. My mother and father were woken up a couple of months ago to a grey figure crouched down on top of their dresser. It was watching them for 30 minutes before it disappeared. A couple of nights later, my parents were woken up around 2 a.m. when they saw another figure by their dresser. This time, it was a lot darker and bigger, and they watched it walk across their room slowly and disappear. I don't know why these things are happening, but I don't think they intend to harm us. They're just watching. Which is still very weird, but I don't know how to describe it. We normally hear something or see something happening in our house about once a week or two. I have tried smudging our house with sage, but that hasn't helped. When I lived back in my parents' house, we got this cool looking vintage vanity dresser from a yard sale. At the time, we didn't think much of it, so we placed it in our living room and had it facing the couch for a very long time. At the time, me and my sister were around 16. I had two other siblings that were a couple years older than me. The house we lived in wasn't very old either. It was night time, and I was sitting out in the living room on the couch when I noticed a pale white thing popping up behind the couch when I would look at the mirror on the vanity dresser. It would slowly pop its head up behind me when I wasn't fully looking at the mirror. I started to get really freaked out when I noticed it was a head with deep black eyes. Starting to tear up, I ran to my little sister's room and told her to come to the living room and sit where I was. She sat and started tearing up too when she saw the figure's head pop up behind her through the mirror. Little did we know that this wasn't the first time we would see it. Both myself and my older sister started to have dreams of this creature. But I don't think it was a dream. I think I got sleep paralysis. I was laying in bed when I saw in my bedroom window the same pale, white, dark-eyed creature outside. I blinked, and it came inside my room, slowly getting closer to me, till it was right beside my bed. I knew it was real, because I felt its breath hit my face. The vanity dresser was then moved to my little sister's bedroom. She would always sleep facing the wall, because she could see the creature in the mirror as she slept. It would also pop out from the corners of the mirror when she did her makeup. Our parents didn't believe us that much until our mother saw it for herself, while my youngest sister was with her. They were in the kitchen cooking dinner when my youngest sister saw the creature behind my mother and the shadow of it starting to dart away. When my sister gasped and screamed because she saw the reflection of the creature from the glass on the oven. There have been multiple times in my house when the doors would shut, cabinets would open, pictures would get knocked down. Hear voices, knocks, hear footsteps on the carpet walking up to you. Things would scare the animals. Has anyone seen a creature like this before? This happened to me when I was about 9 to 11 years old. I was spending the summer in a smallish town in North Dakota with my dad. He lived in an old apartment building full of old people on a corner with huge trees. Out front was a plaque commemorating a church that once existed on that same spot. There was always a creepy vibe around the whole place, but not many tangible things happened. I do remember sleeping under a big comforter on hot summer nights, and sweating profusely because I was too afraid to be exposed to whatever creepiness lurked in the dark corners of my room. There was one night that I heard the bathroom fan on and sink running, as if someone were brushing their teeth or shaving in the wee hours. He said it wasn't him, but who knows? On the day of my most memorable experience in that apartment, my dad was at work, so I was home alone at the apartment, doing what unattended kids did in 2001. Drinking Mountain Dew and playing around on the internet. I was there all morning and all afternoon, enjoying my independence. Late afternoon rolled around, and I decided it was time to log off and ride my bike across town to my grandma's house. I turned off all the lights and shut the door to leave. I realised within a few seconds that I forgot to lock the door, so I turned around and reopened it. As I opened the door, I heard a rustling sound. It sounded like someone digging through plastic grocery bags under the sink. And then I saw him. There was a man standing in the kitchen, leaning cowboy style with one bent leg against the counter and sink area. He had a cowboy type hat on and was looking down. He was a solid black shadow, seemingly flat with no dimension. Then he turned his head to look up at me, while stark white eyes that made no sense and a creepy white slow smile. I screamed, "Holy shit!" and slammed the door shut, not caring that it was unlocked. I ran so fast down the 3 stories of stairs to get the heck out of that building and to the safety of Grandma's house. Coincidentally, as I exploded through the front door of the building, I crashed into my dad, who was just getting home. I didn't explain anything to him and just kept going. Fast forward years later, I'm a teenager living with my mom in Minnesota. I had a few girlfriends sleeping over at my house, and we were all camped out in the living room, which shares an open concept design with the kitchen. The next morning, one of my friends told me she saw a creepy man in the pantry of the kitchen. I told her it must have been my mom's boyfriend. She was creeped out and said no, definitely not him. She then described the man she saw. It was exactly what I had seen several years prior, and a state away at my dad's. Each experience would be creepy on its own, but combined, I felt afraid, paranoid, and violated. How long has this thing been around? Who is it, and what is it? Is it there when I can't see it? So many questions. No sightings since, but many, many other paranormal experiences throughout my life. It was around 1995 or so. Would have been my sister's 9th birthday, since I was 13 at the time, and she's 4 years younger than me. We had a birthday party. Kids over doing kids do. It was a good time. Late in the evening, we decided to have a seance of sorts. We fashioned a spirit board out of notebook paper. We put all the letters and numbers and phrases on it with a marker, and then we took a shot glass from the cabinet to use as what the devil are those things called? A planchette? The thing that points to the letters. My mom acted as a medium, with her hands alone on the shot glass, while we asked the spirits different questions. I remember getting into an argument with a spirit that claimed to be Elvis Presley, but I don't remember why. I brazenly told Elvis that I hoped Graceland burned to the ground. Kids, my mom told me to shut up and knock it off. Then we talked to someone who identified himself as Brian Long. We were living in Commerce City, Colorado at the time, which is the home of Adams City High School, where I would have attended a year and a half or so from that point in time had we not moved away. This is noteworthy and necessary to include, because Brian claimed he was once a student of Adams City High School, though I don't remember what time frame he provided, if he provided one at all. I have a vague memory that it was the recent past, but I cannot remember anything more than this. He said that he drowned while on vacation. I want to say somewhere on the west coast. Anyway, he was a friendly spirit, and I took a liking to him right away. We all did. Some may, understandably, suspect that my mom was controlling the shot glass and making things up as she went along. I might be able to convince myself of that, except for what happened next. Remember I said it was my sister's birthday? Brian said he wanted to wish her a happy birthday. There was a small candle burning several feet away, and he said, "Watch the candle." We all turned and looked. As we did, the flame gradually faded until it was nearly out. Then it popped back up again. We turned back to the board, goosebumps running up our bodies, and Brian said, "Happy birthday." I'd like to take this opportunity to explain a few things. Someone immediately said, "Your mom did it." My mom was on the other side of the room. She would not have been able to blow a gust of air from that distance strong enough to achieve this effect. And even if her lungs were powerful enough to do so, exhaling that hard would have made a noise that would have been immediately heard and felt. Maybe it was one of the other kids. Nope. We were all several feet away. Not as far as Mom, but far enough that it would have been noticed by everyone else. Maybe it was a trick candle and she rigged it. The seance thing was a random, spur-of-the-moment thing that we hadn't planned on. She would have had to have known we were going to do it ahead of time in order to set up the trick candle. As Sherlock Holmes once said, once you eliminate everything else, whatever is left, no matter how probable, is the truth. Brian was really there. Was he who he claimed to be? He seemed benign enough. Friendly, warm, for a dead person. He had a lot of life in him. Which is why we chose to talk to him several more times. We always asked for Brian. Brian was always happy to talk to us. Eventually, though, it came to an end. I don't remember if we all just got busy with other things, or if my mom got tired of playing medium for us, but eventually we stopped talking to him. Well, everyone else did. I continued having sessions alone. I liked this dead kid. I considered him a friend. Then, one day, I asked for Brian and got a different spirit. "Where's Brian?" I asked. "Moved on," not Brian replied. "You mean he went to heaven?" I said. "Yes," the spirit answered. That's when I put the spirit board away and stopped altogether. My friend was gone. I didn't really want to talk to Elvis again. Playing with the spirit board stopped being fun. So today I was on my bed talking to my boyfriend, and then something caught my eye from the window. It was like tiny white lights dancing and flying around in the air outside. I thought I was seeing stars, the ones you see when you sneeze too hard and so on. But I looked into my room and I didn't see them. So I looked out the window again and see if they go over the frame of my window to know it's light stars from that. And they weren't. They were literally outside. There was no sun in my eyes or outside was too bright. They were still dancing and floating around. And it was one of the stars. To me, they go pretty quickly. And after I blinked a couple of times, they go. But they were there for a long time, even after I stopped looking out for a while and didn't see them inside. As soon as I looked out the window and it was getting darker outside, I still saw them. This is why I can't explain it. I was also in awe when looking at them, which I never experienced with stars after sneezing or something like that. I didn't tell my boyfriend because he would only have made fun of me, but I genuinely couldn't explain it. I'm not sure if I consider this as a haunting or not, but this did happen. I'm from a small town in India, and by small, I mean we don't have a lot of educational institutions here. So to do coaching for exams, I had to go to the nearest city, which was around an hour's drive on a lonely highway. The timings were 4 to 8 p.m, and it would take me 9:30 to reach home. We used to do carpooling. There were 7 of us friends who used to attend the coaching daily. One day, while returning at night, we were crossing the bridge on the highway, when suddenly a man rushed in front of our car. The shocking part as that there was no way he could have rushed in from the sides as we were on a bridge. The driver somehow managed to apply the brakes, and mostly all of us heard a thud except one of my friends, who believed he saw the man escape and jumped down the other side of the bridge. There was no dent on the car, nor was there anyone near the car. We were stopped right in the middle of the highway with no cars approaching from far away. Our car refused to start when we wanted to leave, and the driver, with our help, pushed the car to the side. He said that there was nothing wrong with the car, and yet it didn't start for the next hour. There was no car approaching with whom we could ask for help, and there were eerie noises coming from the land beneath. None of us was brave enough to check below the bridge, but finally, after an hour, the car did start and we could finally leave that place. It's one of the most uneasy feelings I've ever had. Located at the banks of the Hot Lake in Oregon's Union County, the Hot Lake Hotel unsurprisingly obtained its fiery name from the close-by thermal spring lakes. Resting at the foot of a massive bluff, the hot springs that make up the Hot Lake were once famous among the local people, who believed that the thermal waters had recuperation abilities. The lake itself was firstly named Ikeshpar by the Nez Perce humans, and the region was called the Valley of Peace, as it was declared as a neutral ground and conflict among tribes turned strictly prohibited. In 1864, a Californian called Samuel Fitzgerald Newhart arrived inside the Grand Ronde Valley and constructed a wooden construction near the lakeside, which bizarrely faced the bluff in preference to the lake. Possibly, he wasn't the biggest fan of the steam and the permeating odour of sulphur drifting from the springs. Despite its age, this structure turned into much like a current-day shopping mall, as it contained a ramification of companies, consisting of a post office, a saloon, a dance corridor, a bathhouse, and even a blacksmith. Although modern, this frontier branch store was without a doubt unknown till 1884, when a stretch of the Union Pacific Railroad was built near Hot Lake. It was the improvement of the railroad that put Hot Lake on the map, and in 1903, the old wooden structure was demolished in order to begin the construction of a luxury hotel. In 1904, a man named Dr. W.T. Fye was involved with the task and masterminded the addition of a brick structure that he meant to use as a hospital. Famed architect John V. Bennis, regarded today for his work on the Oregon State University campus, was brought in to lay out the structure and endowed it with its colonial-inspired appearance. By 1908, the principal brick wing of the hotel was finished and covered a humongous region of 65,000 square feet. This wing even contained its own Georgian-style U-shaped solarium, which confronted the bluff and was supposed for the hotel's clinical vacationers. What made the hotel particularly first in the business for its time was its utilization of the close-by geothermal waters to warm its buildings, which made it the first industrial property on the globe to incorporate geothermal heating. When the hotel ultimately reopened, it consisted of 105 visitor rooms, a 60-bed surgical ward, a ballroom, a saloon, a confectionery, a drug shop, a newsstand, reception rooms, laboratories, and a commissary. The health center construction also had specialized soaking tubs that were facilitated by the lake water, an operating room with an elevated observation deck, and a 1,500 visitor dance hall. Also, the property produced its very own vegetables, dairy goods, meats, and eggs, making it nearly absolutely self-sufficient. It consequently ended up being known as the town under one roof. Dr. Fye formally bought the hotel in 1917 and renamed it Hot Lake Sanatorium. From then on, it was not just a hotel for the rich, but additionally, a hospital in which groundbreaking experimental scientific practices have been carried out using geothermal waters from the springs. Dr. Fye even added a modern-day X-ray facility to the sanatorium, so that sufferers could also accept radiation treatments. Dr. Fye and his team have been celebrated for their fulfillment in treating health issues, inclusive of arthritis, tuberculosis, alcoholism, and venereal disorder, which are attracted the attention of the Mayo brothers and subsequently earned the medical institution the nickname the Mayo Clinic of the West. Behind the scenes, however, it was believed that Dr. Fye was an ungodly and arrogant man who regularly attempted to seduce his women patients and refused to socialize with his personnel. It appears the healing powers of the thermal waters weren't enough to keep him alive, as he suffered a premature demise in 1931 because of pneumonia. From then on, the hotel became marked by tragedy, as its western wing was engulfed with flames on the 7th of May 1934. The wood structures were utterly decimated, leaving only the 65,000 square foot brick portion of the resort. Having been crippled, the hotel never recovered completely, and it was only the medical institution located on the third floor that was able to retain functionality. All through World War II, the construction was used as a nurses' schooling centre and a flight faculty. In an even darker flip, the hotel's foyer was reportedly also used to house corpses of the infected during a typhoid epidemic, as the ground was too hard during the winter to dig their graves. The construction was bought by A.J. Roth in 1951, who transformed it into a nursing house and later into an asylum. It functioned in this capacity until 1974, while trade of possession caused it to be repurposed as a restaurant and nightclub. This vibrant transformation turned into a quick-lived one, because it operated with little fulfillment for 2 years, until the ultimate fall. Living on the second floor of the property, proprietor Donna Patty, her husband, and the caretaker Richard Owens were among the first human beings to talk openly about the ghostly population that they witnessed wandering the grounds of the vintage structure. Undeterred by the hotel's ghostly popularity, Dr. Lyle Griffith bought it in the course of the mid-80s and used one nook of the property as a bathhouse. But by 1991, the hotel had closed down completely and remained abandoned for an astonishing 15 years. Defaced by vandals and ravaged by the elements, the hotel changed into nothing but a shadow of its former self. Folks who had been sufficiently courageous to set foot at the property pronounced seeing an apparition of a man lingering within the shadows, normally carrying a spade. He's stated to be the spirit of an old gardener who committed suicide either by putting himself inside the grand ballroom or jumping from the higher tiers of the construction. Others record seeing a small boy walking throughout the hotel's top floor, laughing and frolicking through the corridors. Witnesses say that he almost always appears from the left side. However, the complete right side of his frame appears to be critically burned, leading many to consider he might have met his demise within the earth of 1934. Wait far too long at the staircase of the second floor, and you may spot the phantom of an aged female, who's often seen muttering to herself as she slowly climbs the stairs. Rocking chairs supposedly circulate on their personal accord in the building, and an antique piano, which used to be owned by the spouse of Robert E. Lee, can on occasion be heard playing by itself on the third floor. All of these incidents are considerably light in comparison to the ghosts of the asylum patients, who've been visibly staring out the higher stage windows and whispering unintelligibly. As if that wasn't terrifying enough, it's said that on uncommon occasions, you could listen to disembodied screaming and weeping resonating from the former operating theatre. In reality, the inn's sinister popularity is so pervasive that there's even an internet site entitled Haunted Hot Lake, which is dedicated to records of ghostly encounters inside Hotel Hot Lake. In line with one such eerie story, a group of high school girls were touring the ruins of the resort as a part of a history venture once they had been triumphed over by the temptation to play around. As they explored the third ground, one of the girls went down the hall methodically, kicking each one of the doorways open. As they reached the door closest to the top of the stairs, the girl kicked the door open joyously, only to have it shut in her face. Greatly surprised by what had just befallen, the girl stood frozen in the hallway and gazed in both directions to discover that every one of the doorways was slamming closed one by one, leading right in the direction of where they'd been standing, Fleeing from the scene, they didn't stop till they reached the car park and stood gazing at the building in horror. Deciding it was only a figment of their creativity, they determined to move back to the hotel. But even before they could enter the front door, they heard what gave the impression of 1,000 windows bursting open at the same time. It appeared that the Hotel Hot Lake was destined to fade into obscurity, till its miraculous purchase in 2003 by David Manuel. With the help of his wife Lee, David started the project of restoring the decimated building, which involved replacing over 360 windows and rebuilding the roof. After many years, the resort opened for public tours in 2005. A setback came in 2008 when the previous west wing of the construction collapsed. But as of 2010, it has functioned as a successful bed and breakfast, consisting of 22 resorted guest rooms, a spa, an artwork gallery, a restaurant, and a small museum. In the course of her stay at the bed and breakfast in 2019, Megan Wells recounted how she became led right into a small, darkened theatre, wherein a DVD of the hotel's records and its owners played on a loop. She noted how there was no mention of the hotel's haunted recognition, and the brand new proprietors were enormously reluctant to speak about its darkish past. In her room, she discovered a small diary for guests to record their experiences during their stay at the hotel, in which she found an entry from one named Susan Brooks, who claimed she spoke to the spirits there. The third floor of the construction nevertheless carries numerous pieces of antique hospital equipment, and tarnished signs on the wall request the visitors to keep your voices low and be sweet, a remnant of its history as an insane asylum. Two years ago, my husband was sick for 3 weeks with a sinus infection or flu-like symptoms. He went to the doctors multiple times and they prescribed him different antibiotics each time. He didn't get any better. One weekend, he slept from Friday to Monday, only waking up occasionally to use the restroom. The next day, Tuesday, he was sleeping in the living room while I was in our bedroom. I could hear him having a conversation, so I assumed he was on the phone. All of a sudden, it sounded like he was yelling, so I rushed into the living room, only to find him sleeping. I went back to the room, and a few minutes later, I heard him speaking again. It sounded like he was calling me, so again, I rushed into the living room and asked, "Are you calling me?" His eyes popped open. He looked at me and said, "They won't let me sleep. I keep asking them to please let me sleep." He was very sick and speaking tired him out easily. He closed his eyes as I asked, "Who won't let you sleep?" He replied, "Dead people. I keep seeing dead people." I said, "Like the sixth sense?" He nodded and said, "They're here in the living room." I scanned the living room with fear. They're asking me for help. They want me to give messages to their families. I keep asking them to leave me alone. I just want to sleep. A lot of them are speaking Spanish, and I'm telling them, "I'm sorry, I don't understand you." We live in a predominantly Hispanic city. I felt his forehead and he was burning up. I took him to the ER and they did his lab work. The normal white blood cell count is 4 to 11,000. My husband's white blood cell count was 400,000. He is diagnosed with empal leukemia. The doctors couldn't believe he was alive, let alone conscious. They said he should have been in a coma or dead. My husband never had any dreams like that before getting sick. He saw dead people again, one more time while he was in the hospital, before he had a cold blue episode. It was the same thing, them asking him for help. I often wonder, were these hallucinations caused by delirium, or was my husband on the bridge between life and death? But because he was on the cusp, the veil was somewhat lifted. The first story is about a weird time loop. She and a cousin were driving down this road to go get some water, since there was also a natural spring around there. On their way back, Their car stalls out and just won't start up again. This happened back in the 80s, so there were no cell phones you could use to call for help. So they started walking. They weren't too far, and they had plenty of daylight left, so it was fine. But as they're walking, they see another car stopped in the distance. They think, oh cool, we can get a ride from these guys. But as they got closer, they see that it's the same make and model of their car. They get even closer and they realise that, no, it's the same car. They're confused as hell, but can completely verify that it's their car by looking in the windows. The sweater she left in the back seat. The empty pop can her cousin was drinking out of. Everything inside was exactly as they left it, and they honestly just didn't know what to do. They hadn't turned off the dirt road at all. They hadn't even walked far enough to make it to another trail they could turn off. They thought it was weird, but figured they should just keep walking as if that's all they could do. They keep going, and sure enough, up ahead down the road, there's a car parked, the same as before. This time, they're tripping out, and they run up to it, and it's 100% their car again. Their cousin gets a stick from the woods and leaves it on the hood of the car, saying that if they keep walking and the same things happen, they can at least see if the stick would be moved. They take off walking, and it happens again. This time, the stick is gone, and they're like, what the fuck? She described feeling afraid that the loop would just go on forever, but it didn't. The next time they walked down the road, they realised they were able to walk further, and eventually made it back to the res. They got help and towed the car, but never got an explanation or figured out what really happened. She has no idea why the stick that they left on the hood of the car disappeared. They really have zero idea, and neither do I. The second story is about a UFO sighting she had with some friends on that same road. This happened years later after the first incident, maybe early 90s, and it was during the summertime. She and her friends were riding around in a car, having a few beers and listening to music. One of the friends commented that there must be a four-wheeler in the woods, but that it's weird since there's no trail there. They look to see what he's talking about, and all you see are these white lights emanating from deep in the woods. You can see that there's a source of light, but you can't see the object itself through the trees. The driver slows down and turns down the music. She described that there wasn't anything too alarming about what they were seeing at that point, but that there was a feeling that something wasn't right. And she said that everyone felt it because all of them got quiet as they looked out the windows, which were wide open. When things got quiet, they were able to hear a low humming. She had a hard time describing the humming, just that it was very low, but almost felt like ringing in the ears. They all heard it. They were silent looking at the lights, but then whatever it was shot up directly into the sky and they saw a UFO. This was so long ago. I wish I could describe more about how it looked, but she did say that the second it shot into the sky, it changed into all sorts of colours that seemed to rotate around the craft. It paused right above the tree line for a few seconds, and then just took off right into the horizon, lights changing again when it moved. When I was 16, my family moved into a new house, and it was the first time all of us kids would get our own rooms. My parents said I would pick my room first because I'm the oldest, but I decided just to take whatever room was left. I wasn't home except to sleep between work, school, and football, so I didn't care how big my room was or anything. The day we moved in, I kind of just set my stuff in a corner of the living room while everybody else chose their rooms and helped my parents unload all of our stuff. You can probably imagine my surprise when I found out the only room that hadn't been picked was the biggest beside the master bedroom. To be honest, I didn't know what to do with all of the space. We just came from a house where there was barely enough room to walk because of all of my siblings' beds were crammed next to mine. And now I had a room all to myself that was even bigger than the one I had to share. Once I had all of my stuff set up and organised, I went to find my dog so we could watch a movie in my room. We had been watching movies together ever since we got her 6 years before, so this was a pretty regular occurrence. I found her chilling in the living room after a day of running around in the backyard and called for her to follow me after picking a movie out of our collection. She followed me until we hit my brother's room and wouldn't come any further. My room was at the end of the hallway and was part of the original house. Everything except for my room and the dining room was an add-on, so there was a fair bit of distance between my room and all of the others. I figured that it was because she hadn't explored everything yet and just needed time to adjust to the new place, so I just shrugged it off and watched my movie alone. Later that night, I was in the dead of sleep when I randomly woke up and found myself staring into the darkness and wondering what had woken me up. I hit the button on my alarm clock, and once my eyes adjusted to its blinding blue glow, I saw that it was a little after 1:30 a.m. When my arm left the comforts of my blanket to activate the light on my clock so I could read the time, I became immediately aware of how cold it was in the room. October in Arizona is nothing like anywhere else in the US. You can still comfortably wander around outside in a tank top and shorts if you want, because it normally only gets down to around 80 degrees Fahrenheit at night, but it had to have been in the high 50s or low 60s in there. Over the next couple of weeks, this continued to happen, despite the fact that the thermostat was set to 75 degrees every night, and other things started happening as well. I was always uneasy being in that room alone, so I eventually convinced my dog to sleep at the foot of my bed one night to make me feel a bit better. She stayed there the whole night, but she seemed pretty stressed, and when I got up to let her outside in the morning, she just refused to go to that side of the house at all. At this point, I was starting to have stuff go missing, like homework assignments and pencils that would show up where I left them a couple of days later. And it felt like when someone is looking over your shoulder and you can just feel their gaze. It even got to the point where I couldn't have the closet door slid open because it just made the whole room feel off when it was open. After about a month of this, I just started crashing on the couch in the living room and avoiding going in my room unless I absolutely needed to. After I had been sleeping on the couch for about a week, my brother decided he wanted to switch rooms, since I wasn't really using it anyway, and he had a lot more stuff than me. And even though I tried to tell him it was a bad idea, we switched rooms. I didn't have anything weird happen in my new room, and he hadn't said he noticed anything, so I figured that I'd been on edge for nothing, until a couple of days later. One night, I heard banging coming from my old room, and figured my brother was just moving things around. He was a night owl, so this wasn't altogether an uncommon thing for him to do. The next morning, he looked absolutely drained, and I asked what he expected, if he was going to be up all night banging around. He kind of gave me a sideways glance and asked me what I was talking about. When I said that I could hear him moving stuff around all night, the colour drained from his face a little bit. I asked him what was up, but he denied anything was, and we just went on with our day. I started noticing that he was more moody than usual and seemed to be sleeping a lot more during the day. My mom started picking up on it as well, and we kept on asking him what was up, until he finally told us one day. He was having the same experience as I had been having when he moved into my old room, but he didn't care because it interested him. My family is really religious except for him. He decided that he didn't want anything to do with religion at a pretty young age, and we all just let him do his thing, because we didn't want that to come between us. He told us that he had been looking into black magic and stuff like that. I don't really understand it, so I won't pretend I know what I'm talking about. But he said that he was messing around with spells and stuff for kicks, and one night, he woke up to a shadow figure peeking at him from in the closet. And when he got up to tell me off for trying to scare him, it rushed at him and disappeared into thin air. It turns out, the banging around I heard that one night was him trying to figure out what could have made him see that because, as I said before, he didn't believe that kind of stuff existed. It got worse over time, with things like that being a regular occurrence, and eventually, the rest of us having to deal with weird stuff going on. That I won't write down, because this is already long enough. Maybe some other time. He still plays around with tarot cards and has even talked about trying to get hold of a Ouija board on occasion. So I'm not exactly sure what to do about it. But he'll go off to university soon enough, and I'm going off to the army this summer to pay for the schooling I've been doing. So I guess He'll have to try and figure out things for himself. If anyone has any suggestions on how I can help him out, I'd be happy to hear them. I mean, he is my brother, so if I want him to mess with stuff neither of us understands and get into some trouble I can't get him out of. Ever since I was a child, I've always drawn in spirits or others. I usually don't pay my gifts any mind when I was younger, but nowadays, I'm trying to get back into the mood of things. I have many scary tales to tell, but this one will be about an apartment I lived in for a few years, when I was around 9. The apartments I lived in were brand new, as in my family was the first to live in them, and they were just finished being built by my province's government. In Canada, the government used schools known as residential or day schools to forcefully assimilate the indigenous population. The majority of these schools murdered and abused many of the children who would have to attend as young as 3 years old until they were 18. The old residential school sat in the next field over and was turned into an office building before it was inevitably torn down. My aunt worked in that building and I visited her there often. In the bathroom stalls were carved "Mary Got's a Baby." This will be key later. The new apartment buildings were unfortunately built on top of unmarked graves of the children who attended the local residential school. The first day in our new home was awesome. It was just my mother, my sister and me. Our local government built our apartments for single-parent housing. It was everything we wanted, especially for my sister and I, as now we didn't have to share a room. All 3 of us settled in my mom's bed to sleep. We laid there, talking about how happy we were. At that point in time, we were only lived in 2-bedroom basement suites and never thought we'd be on the top floor with our own rooms. We slept in our mom's bed the first night. At around midnight, we were all still awake and we heard children giggling and the sound of marbles rolling on the floor, with little feet running above our heads. I looked to my mother and said, "Who is that?" To which she replied tiredly, "It must be the upstairs neighbours." I didn't think twice until my sister turned and said, "But Mommy, we're the upstairs neighbours." We didn't get much sleep that night. A few months went by with more and more activities. Our family had gotten so aggressive with each other, and with my sister reaching teenagehood, she became ruthless and cruel. She'd scream and slam doors, chase me around the apartment till I had to lock myself in. I once spent 4 hours locked in the laundry room because she wouldn't stop. I spent a lot of time mulling in my room, which just so happened to be the most active part of the house. We think it's because I was so sad and defeated, whatever it was like to feed on that, let alone my sister's anger. My room was different. Its doorway had a corridor so you couldn't see out or in unless you walked through it. To combat that, I had an old fatback television from the 90s. It sat on an angle in the opposite corner of the door, which meant I could see past the corridor and down our hallway through the reflection. Next to that was an antique desk that we got a few years before we moved at a local antique shop. At bedtime, I'd fallen asleep watching Little Bear or Winnie the Pooh. My mother would come in and turn the TV off when she knew I was sleeping. She'd also turn my bedside lamp off, which proved to be a problem. Every night at 3 a.m, my television would turn on by itself, and every night, the ringing sound of it booting up would wake me. When this would happen, my closet door would be slid open, and the hockey stick would be on the floor or even leaning against the wall. Inside the closet, you could make out a big shadow. If it were to stand, I'd guess it'd be almost 7 feet tall, but it was always hunched over, crouched in the corner of my closet. I'd rush to flick my lamp on and it'd be gone. I rarely got any sleep at all, and although the shadow seemed malicious and acted as a poltergeist, it felt comforting, as it was always there when my family life was going down the drain. When I did sleep, I'd have loving dreams of a man caring for me and holding me when I felt sad, and I could physically feel the hugs. One time, my mother was off to work and kissed my forehead goodbye. She left, and it was just me at the house when I was half asleep, eyes closed. I felt a pair of arms hug me tight. so tight I couldn't move. I believed my mother came back to hold me again, so I opened my eyes to say goodbye once more. And I realized no one was there, and it was still holding me. Broad daylight, eyes open. It finally let go, and I sat up and rushed to the living room and went on with my day. Some days I would fall asleep early when I was too knackered after school. One of those days, I was woken by my TV like clockwork at 3. I got up to turn it off when I saw a girl in a white nightgown standing in my doorway in the reflection of the television. I assumed it was my sister and got mad at her for just standing there and to crawl into my bed if she wanted to sleep with me, to which I got no response. I stormed into my corridor to see no one standing there and just in time to witness her long black hair running into the bathroom, diagonally opposite of my room in the hallway. I rushed to the bathroom and flicked on the light to find myself alone. My mother called out to me and demanded that I stay in her room, and she said my sister was gone to a sleepover after I had gone to bed. Not long after all this activity, my mother refused to let me sleep in my room. I still spent most of my time in there, writing or drawing at my desk next to my window. Most of my friends lived in the same buildings as me, and I had become so depressed, I used to watch them playing from my window. A couple of times they told me they witnessed a man standing behind me as I would stare at them. I spent hours at that desk and wrote many stories. One day, I was underneath it, grabbing a stack of paper, when I looked up to see a carving that read, "Mary got a baby." When I came to the realization that this specific desk is from when the residential school was in operation. Not long after this discovery, and later confirmed by my aunt, did we move out, but as we were loading up and moving the truck, a neighbour saw the desk and decided to take it for themselves. We still to this day don't know who took it, but I have prayers for them that they don't suffer the way I did and still currently do. Whatever resides in my closet, still to this day is attached to me. Well over a decade and 2 provinces later, it's still there. Now that I'm trying to be more in tune, maybe I'll figure it out once and for all. A little backstory. My wife's grandma died in April, not COVID related. My father-in-law got the house, and being 70 and alone, didn't want to move and live in the bigger house alone. So he basically gave it to my wife, I, and our twin girls. Here's a list of events and some logical explanations, if I have one. Just after Grams passed, my father-in-law was staying at the house to keep a presence there, so no one would think it was abandoned. He was working on a puzzle at the kitchen table, so he had a lamp on the table. When he went to bed, he left the lamp on. The next morning, the lamp was off, but the overhead light in the next room was on. This is the room where she passed, and that light was on the whole time she was in her last days. Explanation: father-in-law is 17 and had just lost his mother. Maybe he didn't remember switching the lights. We shut our door to our room when we shower, so we don't wake up the girls. I was in the shower, and my wife was in the closet organising it. She comes into the shower and asks if I went outside. I say no. She tells me that our bedroom door is open, and she was sure it was shut before she went into the closet. Explanation: the door swings open if not completely shut. Maybe she didn't get it latched. I was in the basement putting some stuff away. I grabbed water out of my mini fridge, and when I did, I heard the sound of cardboard sliding. It sounded like it came from the other side of the basement. Explanation: none. Almost shit myself and booked it out of there. My wife was looking at things on one of the shelves we have yet to start to go through. I remember her finding a bag of those green plastic army men and the little cowboys and Indian toys. Later, while sitting at my table working on RC cars, I saw something fall out of the corner of my eye. It was that shelf area. A bag with who knows what inside of it fell. I picked it up and stuffed it into a box. Me and the wife were in the basement. She was painting canvases and I was wrenching on RC cars. Out of nowhere, some metal wire shelves that were leaning up against the wall went bang and rang out. The wife yelled at me and asked what I was doing. I was like 10 feet away from the shelves, sitting in a chair with my back to the shelves. I went and looked at the shelves. Something fell and hit them. I'm not sure what, as the basement is a total mess right now, and I don't know what was there. After the wife got done painting, she sat at the table across from me and read. We both heard a cardboard box slide from the opposite side of the room from the shelves. I then said loudly, "Could you please quit moving stuff?"